Of the Airports Cost Recovery for Processing of International Travellers Bill. When we were last considering this bill, we were debating Part 1. Reno Chirikatni had the call and has 2 minutes. Gee, I don't think he wants the call. Well, I was going to say he has 2 minutes 30 seconds remaining. So the question is that Part 1, debate on clauses 3 to 5 stand part. I'm going to call Darian Fenton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair. Labor is supporting this bill. This is the Airports Cost Recovery for Processing of International Travellers Bill. And it's Part 1 is mainly about a purpose, interpretation and the Act binding the Crown. So most of Part 1 is taken up with interpretation of different terms used throughout the bill. The aim of the bill is to enable the Crown to recover the costs of aviation security, biosecurity and customs traveller processing from the operators of new or re-established international airports or international airports which sometimes request travellers be processed in a non-routine manner. As I said, we support this bill, but this is yet another bill that has languished on the order paper. And interestingly, after the debate we had in the committee stages of the last bill, this one was supposed to commence on the 1st of January 2011. And so all of this time, when we could have been having cost recovery, 50-50% split with the government and the providers, we have been wasting time on a whole range of other things, and the government has let this bill slide. And it was actually introduced on the 9th of September 2010, had its first reading very soon after, the next week, so it was clearly the Minister of the time thought it was, it was very, very urgent, and was referred to the Primary Production Committee, and they reported back on the 15th of November 2010, and quite reasonably they reported back believing that it was going to commence on the 1st of January. So I feel very sorry for those select committees who did their job diligently. The select committee members did their job diligently, heard 8 submissions from groups and individuals, or considered them and heard 3 submissions. And what's even sadder about this bill, Mr Chair, is when you look at who was on the select committee at that time, and it gives you a bit of a time warp. It's another time warp. It's another time warp. I mean, we have some good members who are still in this House, but there are others that are just a distant memory now. Sandra Gowdy was on the select committee. Sandra Gowdy. And so she was on the Primary Production Select Committee that considered this bill, and obviously did her job diligently because it got reported back very quickly. The Honourable Jim Anderton. The Honourable Jim Anderton, he was on it as well. Yes, he was quite a good campaign manager, actually. I'm quite pleased that he's moved on and not worried about this bill. We also had Brendan Burns and Dr Ashraf Chowdhury. And I know, now he's gone too, but I know he's thinking about the last bill we were debating. He was very concerned about the lack of ethnic representation at the time as well. So he did his job. But it is interesting when you think that's how long that this bill has taken. That was so important at the time. What's even more interesting, Mr Chair, is this has a very long history, this bill. It goes back to 2004 when there was policy development for the funding of passenger clearance services, and that was overseen by the Ministerial Committee on Funding of Border Security under the chairmanship of the Honourable Dr Michael Cullen, the Minister of Finance. And the Ministerial Committee developed a set of proposals on how passenger clearance services at international airports could be funded and implemented. And off those proposals went out. They formed the basis of stakeholder consultation, and there was a consensus reached among industry stakeholders that while there was no ideal option, the agreed position reflected the best solution in terms of the principles that stakeholders were most concerned about. In 2005, the government specifically considered the allocation of aviation security charges across airports, and that was around about the time, or maybe a couple of years after, when aviation security had been ramped up in New Zealand after the 2001 9/11 situation. You know, some of us can remember the days when we didn't have to go through security at domestic airports, regional airports. And that had further consultation. 2006, another consultation process which formed the foundation for a cabinet paper and drafting instructions for a bill called the International Passenger Clearance Funding Bill. Then we got to 2008. Now, what happened there? Well, you know, we know that 2008 was election year, Mr. Chair.
Darian Fenton.
But there was some more consultation around the proposals around the change, and there was a lot more consultation. But anyway, no bill emerged, and of course we had an election, and so all of those years of work of studying this issue disappeared. And we got to 2009, a national-led government, and they got Customs to issue a consultation document to stakeholders for determining policy for restart international airports. So there was a whole sort of new aspect added to that, and that might be because we were starting to see regional airports operate as international airports. And it really wasn't until 2010, as I've said, that there was a bill that came to this House, and that was called the Airports Cost Recovery for Processing International Travellers Bill. The interesting thing about all that, Mr. Chair, is that Labor did all the work, and we did it very carefully. We consulted with stakeholders in a changing industry, where there were new challenges, where there were new international airports being developed, where there were biosecurity challenges, and where there were other customs services and additional costs emerging or being added onto the government. So I do find it interesting that we are yet again debating a bill that has been around for nearly 4 years, 2 days or the day before we rise for Christmas. And I cannot help but think, either the Minister of Primary Production has so little influence in the Cabinet that he couldn't get this up the order paper. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's not. Well, you can tell us why. Either that, or wasn't dealing with biosecurity and aviation security issues were not a priority for this government, and cost recovery was not a priority for this government, or I don't know. They just lost the plot. It's possible that the government just lost the plot and they forgot about it. So they've been around for so long, they forgot about this bill, and then they went, oh goodness, we better get this out, we better do something about it. We've got some issues around biosecurity. Oh, another theory I have, Mr. Chair, is of course we've had all this restructuring, haven't we, of the Ministry of what's it called, Primary Industries, which is now something else. Oh no, it's just called the Ministry of Primary Industries, and it used to be called something else, so there's been a massive restructuring going on, merging departments and shuffling agencies around and giving them new names and rebranding them, and that's been a massive distraction. Biosecurity New Zealand's been through 2 restructures under this government, and it is now part of the new Ministry of Primary Industries. So, you know, we've had reports from the Auditor-General about the benefits of that merger, and whether the investment with biosecurity brand public awareness was being lost. And of course, between 2008 and 2012, the government cut 91 biosecurity officers' positions, and the number of dogs on active sniffer duty at Auckland Airport dropped from 20 to 13 over the same period. Yet, as we know, the number of international visitors to New Zealand has increased, and the government keeps boasting about that. Some of them have been coming in, a lot have been going out actually, over the last few years since this government. But the budget in 2009 cut $3.5 million from biosecurity over 4 years, and then in 2010 they cut another at $9.5 million over 4 years. So getting back and addressing the purpose of the bill, my point is, Mr. Chair, is that while the aim is laudable and we support it, the Labor Party supports it, we believe that the government has not put its mind to achieving the purpose of this bill, and it needs to get on with it because the issues of biosecurity, customs, aviation security come at a huge cost to the Crown, and international airports should have to realise, any new international airport should have to realise part of those costs. We know that Rotorua and Invercargill have established international airports since in the last couple of years. Hamilton's an international airport? Was an international in name. Once was an international airport. Palmy's an international airport. Well, these international. We've got a lot of international airports per capita compared to the rest of the world, and that means that we have to have very, very good systems in place, but they come, as I said, Mr. Chair, at a cost to the Crown. So the purpose of the bill is laudable. Let's get on with it.
Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's my pleasure to take a call on the airport's cost recovery and processing of